Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started. I'm Noah Levine. Welcome to everybody. Anybody that's here for the first time on this first Thursday. I want to remind everybody, I like to begin by acknowledging that this is not a Refuge Recovery meeting. If you're looking for a meeting of Refuge Recovery, which are peer-led meetings, you're in the wrong place. And what you've tuned into live, or maybe you're watching later on YouTube, is this is an offering from Refuge Recovery World Services of a teacher-based Refuge Recovery World Services offering, where I will give some Buddhist teachings, lead a meditation. We'll have some time for discussion about it. And so much different than our peer-led meetings where nobody's doing Q&A or giving teachings or anything like that. Hopefully that's not happening in your refuge meetings. For those first Thursdays, I just choose different topics, that are associated with the Buddha's teachings and what we're doing here, how we're applying Buddhism to our process of healing and recovering from addiction and the suffering that addiction creates, both in our lives and in the world and in the lives of people who care about us, care about the addict. And the topic tonight is loving kindness, what in the Buddhist word is metta. And so those of you who are familiar with Refuge Recovery and what we're doing, we break the meditations down into two categories. Mindfulness categories, and mindfulness leads to wisdom. Mindfulness leads to the wisdom of compassion and the wisdom of non-attachment, understanding that everything's impermanent, not so personal. And then the other category we call heart practices. And there are traditionally 4 heart practices, but we practice 5 or 6 heart practices in Refuge. And that is loving kindness, what we're going to do tonight, and compassion and appreciative joy, equanimity, and then also forgiveness and Tonglen, which is another compassion practice. My understanding is that originally in the Eightfold Path, right, we're using the Buddha's Eightfold Path here in Refuge. And if you look at all of the early material on the Eightfold Path, he talks about the meditative practice of mindfulness, and then he talks about concentration practices. Technically, heart practices, loving kindness, like we're going to do tonight, would be categorized as a concentration practice because you're reciting phrases in your mind and you're concentrating your mind on these phrases. And so you're creating wholesome emotions, wise emotional states, kindness and friendliness, and but the actual function is you're concentrating on these 3 or 4 phrases that we say. But originally, all the Buddha taught was mindfulness, and the heart practices, the loving kindness teaching, didn't come until sometime after the Buddha's enlightenment, the awakening. And my sense was that originally he felt, oh, mindfulness is enough and it will lead to, he talked about his own experience. He said, I practiced mindfulness. I learned how to concentrate. I learned how to have open awareness and mindfulness. And it led to this feeling of loving kindness for all living beings. And it led to this feeling of compassion for myself and all living beings, and appreciation and equanimity. But later, when he had hundreds of students and thousands of students, he started to give them more teachings and more techniques, skillful means. And so this metta, loving kindness teaching, came about some years after his awakening, isn't part of the original Eightfold Path, but is classified as, part of the 8th factor, the concentration meditation techniques that we do. So before we meditate, I'll share with you this translation of the sutta. Sutta is the Buddhist word for scripture, and it's the sort of the ancient original teachings, as close as we can get to the original teachings of the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, 2,600 years ago. And so this is originally spoken in a language called Pali, and then translated into Sinhalese, which is Sri Lankan, and then translated from Sri Lankan, Sinhalese, or Pali text sources into English. So it might not be completely accurate. Of course, when people translate things, they can take liberties with, like, well, I think that word should mean this or should mean that. But this is as close as we can get from this translation into English of the Buddha's words on loving kindness. And as you'll see, there's a meditation technique offered here, but it's much bigger than just the meditation technique. There's a whole bunch of good advice, wise advice about how to live our lives. So the sutta starts with, this is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outwards and unbounded. Free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or laying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. So we can reflect on that a little bit, and let's meditate, and then we'll have some discussion, and I'll share some of the pieces that I find inspiring and important about this sutta, this teaching on loving kindness. So find a way to sit that's upright and relaxed. Allowing your eyes to be closed. Bringing your awareness into your body, into the present time experience of sitting here listening. And this image from the sutta of radiating kindness. What would it feel like to you to radiate kindness from your heart towards all living beings? Inclining the mind, the heart towards goodwill, friendliness, loving kindness. This core meditation instruction that the Buddha offered us, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all living beings be at ease. So maybe just saying that in your mind. this intention to radiate loving kindness in all directions. May all living beings be at ease. Over and over, may all living beings be at ease, those near and far away, young and the old, the wise and the unwise, even our enemies included in all living beings. The possibility of forgiveness, of compassion, of kindness towards those who are suffering, as well as those who are not suffering. So then coming back from this broad intention and aspiration towards all living beings, just come back to this living being right here, yourself, this body, this heart, this mind, having suffered from addiction. Radiate loving kindness towards yourself. Turn all of your love, all of your kindness, unconditional acceptance and friendliness, as much as you can in this moment, towards yourself. Even if you don't feel that way yet or mean it, it's just the intention, the willingness. And we say these three phrases to ourselves. May I be happy. And let that land. Put that thought in your mind, whether you mean it or don't mean it yet. May I be happy. And then saying to ourselves, may I be at ease. And you can make this your own. You might say, may I learn to be at ease with myself just as I am. May I learn how to be at ease. And the third phrase, may I be free from suffering. These are the three traditional phrases that my teachers taught me. May I be happy. May I be at ease. May I be free from suffering. But you can find your own words. You can use these, borrow them. Or your own phrases that are loving and kind, friendly, aspirational. May I be happy. May I learn to be happy, content. May I be at ease with myself just as I am, with my mind, with my body, with the difficulties and suffering of the past and the insecurity about the future. May I be at ease. May I be free from suffering, the suffering of craving and clinging, suffering of addiction, the suffering of anger and aversion, resentment, the suffering of self-centeredness, self-centered fear. May I be free from all these ways that I create suffering for myself, my cravings, my aversions, my self-centeredness. May I learn to be free. May I be happy. May I be at ease. May I be free. We focus the mind. When other thoughts come in, we replace those thoughts with these simple aspirational phrases. May I be happy. Cut through the plan, the memory, the unworthiness that may arise. Just come back to the next loving kindness phrase. May I be at ease. May I be free from suffering. Slowly, but consistently to yourself over and over. Imagine seeing yourself through the eyes of unconditional love, the eyes of a benefactor, a teacher, a wise friend, guide, who accepts you just as you are, who has compassion for your pain, appreciation for your joy, wishes you for your happiness, for your ease, for your freedom. Trying to see ourselves the way that the Buddha would see us, an awakened being who would have no judgment, only compassion. And bring to mind the people in your life who have supported you, inspired you, that you've benefited from knowing, your association with, even those people that you've never met. The books that have inspired you, the authors, the teachers. Send loving kindness, this category we call the benefactor. Just as I wish to be happy, I wish for your happiness. May you be at ease. May you be free from suffering. Extending loving kindness to the people who are somewhat easy to care about, to be friendly towards. Those who we appreciate already. And then expanding to also include your friends and family, mixed. Some of our family members are quite challenging, some are easier. Some of our friends are quite easy to love, some are more challenging. Bring to mind friends and family and send loving kindness to them. May you be happy. May you be at ease. May you be free from suffering. this universal healthy desire for happiness, for well-being, for ease that we all share. Now expanding, bringing to mind someone that you don't know, maybe somebody here in the Zoom, someone that you've seen throughout your day. With the understanding that just like you, they wish for happiness. They're healing, trying to recover. This process of compassion, forgiveness, that we're all in together. Start sending loving kindness to a stranger, someone that's not well known to you. With the simple phrases, may you be happy, may you be at ease, may you be free from suffering. Now comes the more difficult part, which is expanding to include our enemies. Bring to mind some people who are difficult to love, who've harmed you in some way, annoy you, people that you resent, that you judge, with the understanding that their difficulties are because of their confusion, their suffering, their ignorance. The possibility of compassion, we extend the practice of loving kindness to free our own heart. This teaching that says, free from ill will. Let none wish harm upon another. Opening the heart to our enemies, to the difficult people in our lives, difficult people in this world. With the phrases, may you be happy, may you be at ease, may you be free from the suffering that you experience, and even if it's caused harm to us, this loving kindness as an aspect of forgiveness. May you be free from suffering. Maybe you have a whole bunch of difficult people. Don't get stuck on the inability to have compassion or kindness towards the people who've harmed you the most. Start with just the annoying people in your life. Start with the easier ones. As we expand, remembering to include yourself, your benefactors, your friends and family, all of the neutral people in our Sangha, in our community, people that you work with, people in your neighborhood, and the difficult people in your life. Start expanding in widening circles as we return to the Buddha's encouragement, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. You can extend, radiate loving kindness to your neighborhood, your town, your city, to the east and to the west, north and south. And if you can visualize, if you're a visual person, start to see the planet covering the whole planet with goodwill, with compassion for all of the suffering, with appreciation for all of the joy, with an attitude of friendliness towards all living beings. As you extend loving kindness in all directions, including everybody here, practicing together right now, also let yourself receive it from yourself, sending yourself, and let yourself also recognize that there are over 50 people joining us live right now, sending loving kindness to you. Breathe that in, that these 50 people here, Refuge Recovery, sending you loving kindness right now, wishing for your happiness, wishing for your ease, for your freedom from suffering. As we come to the last couple of minutes of our meditation practice, I'll remind you that the Buddha once said we could search all realms of existence and never find anybody more deserving, more worthy of our love and kindness than ourselves. Many of us find ourselves to be the hardest person to love. And this practice is the gradual healing, the gradual awakening to learning to love ourselves again. Remembering our worth and our ability When you're ready, you can allow your eyes to open, bring your attention back to the room you're in, to the screen, shifting, stretching, whatever feels good. Take a moment, just reflect on where you're at currently with this practice. Maybe for some of you, it's new. Some of you have been doing it in meetings. Some of you like loving kindness and you're like, finally, permission to be kind and loving and And some of you fucking hate loving kindness. And you're like, oh, this is gross. I don't know how to be kind to myself. I don't feel worthy, and I certainly don't feel, all that good at being kind towards others. Like whatever your, just that, as much acceptance of ourselves where we're at in the process. This is a very central practice in Refuge. It's been a very central practice in my life for the last over 3 decades. And I had a real developmental process with it. It took quite a while in the beginning to, I had a lot of resistance. When I started, some of you have heard me say this before, mindfulness was such a relief. Like when I started mindfulness practice, that simple breath awareness and learning to ignore my mind was such a relief, because my mind was so insane and really filled with confusion and craving. And so bringing my attention to the breath, I was like, oh yeah, meditation helps. But then when I started doing loving kindness, I was like, this doesn't help. This makes me feel worse. This makes me face all of my self-hatred and my resentments and my, feels like inability to forgive. And I went to my teachers and said, like, I'm doing it because, you're telling me to do it and it's part of the Buddha's teachings and I'm in, right? Buddhism makes sense, I'm in, but this is hard. This feels like it stirs up a lot of stuff, and kind of got this consistent, well, like just keep trying, and that, like, you don't even have to mean it yet. Just say the phrases and fake it till you make it is totally fine. That sort of attitude, like you don't have to. And then I saw, like, after doing it for a couple of years consistently, that it started to shift, and I started to feel a bit more kindness towards myself and others. And a bit, same thing with the forgiveness and the compassion. And then it was very gradual, like in that first 5-10 years, that I really started to mean it and I really started to feel it. And if I would have given up in the beginning and said, like, well, this doesn't work, I tried it, it doesn't work, right? Have you ever heard that from somebody? Like, oh yeah, I tried to meditate, I can't meditate. Like I tried to be kind. It's a little bit like saying, like, I can't play the violin. I tried once, or I can't fly an airplane. Like, you can learn, right? Meditation is a developmental. Kindness, for most of us, is a developmental skill, especially when it comes to being kind to our minds and to our emotions, and this high, bar that the Buddha experienced in his teaching, which is all living beings, even the most confused beings are worthy of loving kindness. And that in some ways we do that for ourselves. The more friendly we become, the more kind we become, the more compassionate, loving, forgiving, the less we suffer. So there is a sort of selfish aspect to this. It's not just about being sort of fake nice to everyone. The healing, the recovery that we're doing for our own well-being. Loving kindness, I could make a strong argument, is relapse prevention. If we're not kind to ourselves, we might relapse. If we hold on to a bunch of resentments towards others, that's the kind of shit that we drink, use, act out about. So this loving kindness process is integral to our recovery and just to our happiness. You do know, and I know a whole bunch of people with really long-term abstinence that are fucking angry and miserable. And I don't know how the fuck they stay sober, because they're so unhappy and miserable. And what we're trying to do in Refuge is not just abstinence, but freedom from suffering. True sense of happiness and well-being and contentment that the Buddhist path leads to. If we practice this path, loving kindness and mindfulness and all of it, the Eightfold Path, the renunciation, the inventories, being of service, going to meet, if we do this thing, it leads to a sense of contentment and happiness and well-being, but we have to do the practices, even if they're really difficult in the beginning. They will get easier over the years. So much good stuff in that sutta, isn't there? I don't know if you've read it before. If you you can Google the Metta Sutta and you'll get different translations. But so much more than just the meditation technique of may all beings be at ease. And then this way that we break it down into the categories, myself and my benefactors and friends and family, neutral people in the so cool. Like when you go to a refuge meeting or whatever meeting, wherever you just choose a stranger and send them loving kindness. Just like start doing that sort of neutral, just choose somebody at the grocery store or at the bank or in traffic, and just rather than that self-centered mentality that we're in most of the time, that altruistic wishing for the happiness and well-being of others will really shift your attitude. And I do it all the time, and I encourage you to do it. There's 3 places in this sutta where the Buddha is alluding to the importance and necessity of forgiveness, where he says, let none deceive another, right? So honesty, right? Practicing the precepts, living a life of rigorous honesty, not deceiving each other. But then this thing about forgiveness, let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. It's not that we're not going to experience anger, but not turning that into the sort of spite and, hatred where we're like, I hope you get hit by a bus. I actually really hope that you get harmed because you've harmed me, or because you're harming the planet or the world or politically or whatever it is that we're upset about. Freeing ourselves through forgiveness from wishing harm upon each other or any being in any state. And then again, there's a further line where he says, free from hatred and ill will. We have to free ourselves from hatred and ill will. And it's really, we have to, I like free ourselves, extricate ourselves. Like hating is normal. And I hope you don't hear this as any blame or judgment that you hate, because the human mind hates all by itself. It's effortless to hate and to have ill will and to despise and to judge and to normal. That's status quo for us human beings. Freeing ourselves from hatred is a really, really radical and very gradual process. By doing these practices, may all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be at ease. And it's where the forgiveness and the compassion practices that we do all come together and connect. There's the stuff in the teaching here about being humble and not conceited, being contented and easily satisfied, and we can take that as a spiritual guidance. Not just like you should be humble, but practice humility. Practice being contented, accepting what's offered. But rather than being so kind of like everything has to be the way that you want it to be all of the time. Practice being easily satisfied, accepting what is. Not so self-centered, conceited, so I, me, mine. It has to be like the way I want it to be all of the time. More and more accepting this world as it is. As we work for a positive change, as we work to be of service, as we work to become better people, kinder, more loving people. And, there's certainly a place. Sometimes I pause because I don't want contentment or ease to sound like complacency, because there's absolutely, Buddhism is not about complacency and just accept it. Sometimes acceptance sounds like, well, just become complacent. But acceptance and loving kindness as the foundation for action. This is the way it is. And because it's like this, and there's so much ignorance and confusion and suffering and addiction, and we have to take action. We're not going to just sit back and be complacent. We're going to get involved. We're going to be of service. How can I help? How can I be of service to you? How can I be kind? How can I be generous? How can I be loving, not complacent? I hope that makes sense. From that place of ease, of well-being, out of compassion, we're engaged constantly. Maybe enough. I mean, I could go on. I love this teaching, and I encourage you to look deeper into it. Refuge Recovery introduces you to the core teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Some of you are already Buddhists and you already know this stuff, and then you're coming to Refuge. Some of you know nothing about Buddhism and you're learning it. You're like, oh, okay, cool. A non-theistic Buddhist approach to recovery. And, I give you some of it in the Refuge text, but there's more. There's more to be discovered, to be uncovered. And it can be sometimes interesting to actually read the words of the Buddha, and things like this of like, whoa, this is pretty close probably to what the guy actually said. And, 2,600 years ago, that's pretty interesting to look at and then take on as a practice, take on as our own guidance. I think I'll leave it there and open to Q&A about loving kindness, about anything about the instructions, or about how to do this in your life, in your recovery, and then also if there's people who want to share how it's benefited your recovery, how it actually has been relapse prevention. One of the things about the concentration practices is that your mind can be saying, hey, you should relapse. Whether it's food or sex or money or drugs or alcohol, whatever, your mind can be saying that. And if you have developed this practice, you can replace it. May I be at ease. May I be happy. May I be free. May I be at ease. May I be happy. Concentration replaces those cravings. And the craving can still be there in the background, but you can actually use a concentration practice to push that craving out of the mind, at least temporarily. The craving might come back, but you can replace. One of the things that we do with concentration meditation is replace the thoughts. So any questions? If you have a question or a comment, you can raise your hand down here on the bottom, and the reaction button is where you raise your hand. I think, yeah, raise hand, and then I'll call on you if you'd like to chat about loving kindness or anything. If you want other things about Refuge, we could go there, but let's try to keep it about loving kindness and our Refuge Recovery process practice. Okay, Chris, go ahead, unmute yourself and jump in.
Hey guys, thanks for that, Noah. Appreciate it. To speak from the standpoint of how this is showing up for me and showing up in my recovery, a couple weeks back during a Saturday night speaker meeting, someone talked about love addiction. And I'd never heard about love addiction. It's the first time I ever heard about it. And yesterday, I'm going through a breakup, 20+ year marriage. And, I sort of went on to Spotify and found a podcast episode about that idea. And it connected me to this notion of building a relationship with myself, which I don't know if I've ever had. I've certainly had very few opportunities through my lifetime to be alone myself. So I think tonight, in terms of the instruction, this felt right on point, just felt right on point. This idea that, this practice I've been doing with recovery has actually been, priming the foundation around some of these things.
Yeah.
So really appreciate that. I do have a question, and I don't I've been practicing Buddhism, sort of Buddhism light, I guess you could say, since I was a teenager. And I feel like it's changed my life over the past few years with having a real meditation practice and really coming into that through recovery and through Refuge. This idea of being born into an additional life, though, a next life. This idea of being non-theistic, and where did that come from? Did the Buddha just have some awareness that this is how it worked, or I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Chris, and I'm glad that the good timing for the loving kindness for your process and your exploration around, looking at love and love addiction and romantic love versus this sort of universal love that the Buddha is talking about, and rebirth, reincarnation. I don't know. I don't know exactly where it came from. For the Buddha, there are some scholars that want to reject it, since it was one of the things that the Buddha seemed to agree with Hinduism about. The Buddha disagreed with Hinduism about a whole bunch of stuff. Hinduism's pretty theistic, and the Buddha said, no, this is a humanist, non-theistic. There's no sort of divine intervention that's going to enlighten us. We have to do all the work ourselves. So he disagreed with Hindus about a lot of stuff, or Brahmanic Indian tradition. But rebirth, he included. He said, I've seen through my own awakening that there's a process going on here beyond just this one lifetime. And, there's a cycle of birth and death. And one of the ways he even called enlightenment, the third noble truth, what we call recovery and healing, he called it the deathless, that there's this process that leads to stopping the cycle of rebirth. I didn't put it very heavily into the book. I don't even know if I really mentioned it in the Refuge Recovery book, because, it's hard to understand. And I don't think it's actually important for us to believe in or not believe in. We'll see when we die. That's sort of my kind of agnostic approach to reincarnation, rebirth. Who knows? We'll see. To me, it doesn't matter that much. What I know for sure is that the more I practice these meditations, this renunciation, the inventories, the meetings, being of service, this, has just transformed my life in this incarnation in such, huge ways that, if there's a next lifetime, okay. If there's not a next lifetime, okay. I'm not living for that sort of future enlightenment or future, just for now, here. How am I showing up moment to moment today? And this, so I'm not sure why the Buddha seemed to think that was true. So, that was his experience. That was part of his awakening. He's like, yep, there's a process going on beyond this one lifetime. Here's the last thing I'll say about that. We have this thing in Refuge, and I think in all of Buddhism, where we say no blind faith asked for. You don't have to believe anything, but see for yourself what's true. And then we move into a verified faith. Now, my own experience of practicing Buddhism for 34 years now is that I have verified through direct experience how mindfulness works, how loving kindness works, how compassion works, how living by the precepts and an ethical life is a better life. I verified, if Buddhism was A to Z, all the way up to LMNOP or something like that, Buddhism feels totally on point, true to me. I don't know about XYZ. I'm not sure about reincarnation, but the dude, hasn't steered me wrong yet. So I tend to have a little bit of confidence that that might be true. Not so important to me whether it's true or not, personally. I hope that's helpful. I know that's not the clearest answer, but
no, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Emily.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I am very new to this group. I'm actually just 4 days out of a rehab center, and I happened upon this group in looking for groups in my area. So I I'm 20 minutes late to the group because I just happened upon it. So sorry if you already asked for newcomers or if I am messing up the meeting etiquette that I'm unaware of that you set in the beginning. But what you said really resonated with me of not just being abstinent, but being free from suffering and loving kindness as relapse prevention. So anyway, I'm interested to hear more about resources, but I'll be quiet about that for now since I know the group is going on.
That's okay, Emily. I'll just jump in real quick and say welcome, and glad you found Refuge Recovery. Part of what you missed at the beginning was me reminding and letting everybody know that this is not a Refuge Recovery meeting. Refuge Recovery meetings are peer-led. And I encourage you to find one, and you can probably log on to a Zoom meeting later tonight, like after this, there's a Zoom meeting happening. So to actually get a sense of what Refuge Recovery meetings are like, this is different. I'm the founder of it. I'm giving a teaching on it. In a Refuge meeting, it would be much more peer-led, and you should check that out, and welcome. So I think the first resource is just the website that you already know about.
Right.
Jump onto a Zoom meeting and meet some of the people in the community. We call the community Sangha. It's the Buddhist word for fellowship or community. And just join us. Welcome.
Thank you. I found a meeting in my area, but I'm not sure how to verify if it's happening, but I'll figure that out on my own and not take up the group's time now.
No problem. If it's listed, it should be happening.
Okay.
If it's on the website, because we cleaned up the listings that if we any meetings that we found out weren't happening, we've taken down. So we believe that meetings are happening if it's an in-person meeting and it's listed.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Paul, were you raising your hand? Okay, go for it. Jump in.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, this is kind of a playful question, but I was at the grocery store earlier and I was checking out hot sauces, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really hot. The other guy, he's like, yeah, that is hot. Like, you only got one life to live, right? I'm like, I didn't want to say anything. And I'm like, okay, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe, but how would I address that, like, to him just playfully, like, oh, did you ever think about reincarnation? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just been thinking about that all day since.
I don't really know. I mean, I guess I've probably been in that situation before too, where people were like, well, you only live once, or was it YOLO? Fuck it, YOLO, you only live once. Maybe. Maybe you only live once. You only live this life one time, right? You'll only be in this body and this mind and this, lifetime once. So that's really what people mean by that. You're only going to have this experience once, this lifetime. Maybe there's future lives, who knows? Maybe not, Also, I feel like, you might be right. Maybe you're right. I don't fucking know. How would we know? But, practicing Buddhism does encourage us to kind of be open-minded to maybe that's not true. Maybe we have a whole bunch of lives, but maybe that piece of like humble and not conceited, and the last thing we want to become is like that annoying Buddhist convert who's going around and like correcting everybody and be like, well, actually, from a Buddhist perspective, you should have loving kindness for all living beings and all you want to be that person in the grocery store lecturing the guy about the hot sauce and about how he's wrong.
Thank you, Noah.
Yeah, so they're just that kind of playful, humble, kind of like, yeah, you might be right. Who knows? Mark, go ahead. This will be our last one, actually. I'm going to shut it down at 6 tonight.
Thanks, Noah. I appreciate it. Just touch on a couple things. For one, you kind of wanted we should comment on how that's affected us. Some of us that have been doing it for quite a while now, and I've been able to, use this as a recovery path. And then I also work in recovery, and taking that, there's definitely the difficult ones, that are looking for a path, and the frustration sometimes, I have to catch myself and bring myself back to sharing that loving kindness sometimes, where I go back into old behavior, old thinking and stuff like that. But definitely I can see the change from when I started practicing Buddhism and loving kindness practice to the way I react to everything in my life. And I catch myself, even when there's old negative talk or negative outlook at other people. And I like the thing that the way you usually end, may any goodness that comes from our practice be shared out with all living beings and things like that, because I do see the ripple effect. There's a certain recovery model that they push at a lot of treatment facilities. It's a 12-step model, but I've been able to have the freedom to share a little bit of our practice with people that doesn't work for. And so also affect those other beings out there. And, just one more thing on, and I'll end with this, is that I'm not sure about the reincarnation thing, but I know just from the time I was young and trying to find something to now that I've lived many different lives in this lifetime, from the way I felt as a child, being married with the kids, from being in jail, involved in addiction, and into recovery, just many lifetimes in this one. So I value all of those as a learning experience, and I want to thank you for being my teacher. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you.
You as well.
There's the phrase in the Metta Sutta that says, let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. And then it uses the image of the ideal mother. It says, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Now, this can be a troubling image for some of us who didn't have an ideal parent, and maybe actually your mother abused you or wasn't loving and protecting. And but the intention here is the ideal loving parent who would protect and who would cherish, and trying to get that attitude. I don't know how many of you are parents, but it is much easier to love your own children than it is to love strangers. It is way easier to love your own children than it is to love your enemies. And even when your children, I'm a parent, and I'm sure many of you are parents, even when your children are being jerks, you still love them, right? Even when they're being really difficult. Hopefully, I know this isn't always true for everyone, and some parents are so abusive, and that's true too. But my experience, anyways, is that as a parent, so much easier to love my kids than it is everyone else. But I love this suggestion of try to be as loving to all living beings as the ideal parent is to their children. And just taking that on with the humility that's like, I fucking can't do it, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to try to be as patient with these people in my life as I am with my kids. I'm going to try to be as patient and loving and forgiving and kind to strangers as I am to my own kids. So consider that. Consider taking that on as a practice. Radiating kindness over the entire world. And you might not mean it yet, and that's okay. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you, if you come back, I'll see you at the next one, which is first Thursday of November. And go to meetings, do your inventories, mentor each other, be of service, start meetings, do all of those things to support this program that we have. And I do this class for free, obviously, but Refuge Recovery is in need of support and of your generosity. Maybe you donate when you go to meetings. Maybe you don't. Not a lot of the meetings are sending much money into World Services. If you'd like to leave a donation tonight, Michelle, thank you for your help tonight. And she has put in the chat a link to the donation page. Refuge Recovery could really use some financial support just to pay the bills and the kind of employees that we have, and to support the infrastructure of Refuge Recovery. So be as generous as you want to be and as you can be. Think about becoming a monthly supporter. Some people are monthly supporters of Refuge, where you just say, hey, I want to give $20 every month to make sure that the nonprofit is getting some support. So please consider that. Couple of Refuge retreats coming up. There's a couple more spaces in the 7-day Refuge Recovery retreat that I'll be teaching in New Mexico in November. So next month, there's a 7-day silent meditation Refuge Recovery retreat. Couple spaces left in that. And then the next opportunity is January. Nothing in December, but in January in Oregon, outside of Portland, Pacific Northwest, there's a weekend retreat. January 13th through 15th. So we haven't really advertised it yet, but the registration is up on the website. Now you've heard about it. You can tell other people about it. You can register for that now. And there's lots of different levels, expensive for a single room, cheap for the dormitory. But hopefully everybody can come. And if we have some scholarship beds for as low as $200 to come for the weekend. So I hope that some of you can come to that and spread the word, help me spread the word about the next Refuge Recovery January retreat. And I have a whole bunch of retreats planned for next year that will start opening for registration as soon as we solidify the plans. I'll be back on the East Coast, and we're planning something in Oklahoma and Pacific Northwest. And I'm looking for a good retreat center in the South, maybe Texas or Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, somewhere in the South, so that I can come to you and you don't have to always come to California for these retreats. Many goodness that comes from our practice and discussion of this metta teaching, the Buddha's Dharma, be shared outward in all directions. May we end the suffering of addiction in our own lives. May we help support other addicts in ending the suffering of addiction. And together, may we create a positive change on this planet. Good to see everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. See you next time.
Thank you
so much.